Are you thinking about a career pivot? Maybe it feels a bit daunting and perhaps even removed from your comfort zone. Well, today's guest has been there, done that, and now she's here to share her experience and a 5 point strategy for you to make the most of your next big career move. Welcome to this episode of 100 Days of Service Now. I'm your host, Kylie Alexander, and on this podcast, we explore all things ServiceNow from business outcomes, capabilities, career, and the people who make it happen. Well, today's guest serves as Customer Success Manager at GlideFast Consulting and recently inducted into the Class of 2024 ServiceNow Rising Star cohort. So without further ado, drop your blue hearts and throw up your air horns for today's guest, Christina Stubblefield. Christina, welcome to this episode of 100 Days of Service Now. So good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. This episode has been a long time coming. You and I are similar in that we are both midlife career pivoters. We've had conversations offline, and now we're ready to extend the conversation that Isela Phelps started with us about midlife career transitioning a few months ago. So happy that you're going to be sharing like a 5 point plan for everyone to take advantage of and for them to kind of launch themselves into the next phase of their lives.
Yeah, definitely happy to be in a conversation with Zella and you as my, people that I look up to in the industry. So happy to share my experience and what value I can bring to anyone trying to do the same.
Awesome. Now, I'm always curious about my guest ServiceNow story. So tell us, how did you come to ServiceNow? Tell us a little bit about your professional journey.
Sure. So I've spent nearly 2 decades in a law firm as a paralegal, senior paralegal, doing litigation, and always drawn to technology, always becoming the person who would become somewhat of a product owner of our software and kind of take over as admin. And my husband works in the ServiceNow industry and has worked for several partners and has been a cheerleader for me to try to cheer me on to switch careers. And yeah, it took me some time, but I kind of wobbled back and forth
Yeah.
into going for ServiceNow and then life and then ServiceNow and then life. And so you and I have talked about how ServiceNow used to open up in the month of July. They would have the ServiceNow fundamentals class for free, and they would also let you take the CAD for free in that month. Or, no, I'm sorry, not the CAD, the CSA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to take that class. This was before Rise Up. The class layout was very different, and they didn't quite make it in the month of July. And then the next July came, the same sort of thing. I did some Udemy classes on JavaScript. Which now Udemy is part of Rise Up, which is a really nice advantage.
So tell people
And then,
for people who don't know, by the way, tell people what is Rise Up?
sure. So Rise Up is ServiceNow's Now Learning platform. So if you go to Now Learning, you can access Rise Up. You could see the different career paths. You can find what maybe best suits you. They have some questions around helping you try to understand like what role would be good for you. And then they have some stories of other people who have done it. And then they have these really cool paths, and they have this nice layout of honeycombs. And
Yes,
as you go through the training, you get to like knock off the honeycombs, which is really exciting.
definitely. I appreciate the gamification, right?
And so, yeah, so Rise Up is ServiceNow's way of saying, we know we're going to bring a ton of jobs and we don't have enough people to fill it. So we're going to offer these classes and let you learn so you can level up and join this community that's growing. And it has, and even the career paths have grown since the time it started. And it's only been around, I want to say like 2 or 3 years is when they, or maybe 2 years is when they changed over to Rise Up.
Yeah.
Uh, and then Next Gen is where you have to apply for a 10-week program. So Next Gen, there's there's two different programs. There's one that's just next gen, and then there's one that's more military, or I should say DoD based. So it's Skill Bridge, and it's training our veterans or people about to come out of the military to take ServiceNow jobs.
Okay, so we're looking at three different things, and I just want to make it clear for the audience. So we have Rise Up, we have Next Gen, and we have Skill Bridge. And just kind of let me lay this out. So Rise Up is an initiative by ServiceNow to skill up people in the ServiceNow platform. So that's a general initiative. And then actually we have four things. We have that. And then we have Now Learning. And the Now Learning is the learning portal that has multiple self-paced classes. And they also have opportunities for you to take instructor-led classes. And that's the learning portal. So it's nowlearning.servicenow.com. Anyone can gain access to that. And then we
Yes.
have the Next Gen and Skill Bridge. And Skill Bridge is part of Next Gen, but it's specifically for people people who are in, or spouses who are in or transitioning out of the military. And that's called Skill Bridge. And for civilians, it's a non-Skill Bridge program. However, it's still part of Next Gen. And that is sort of like a boot camp or a learning cohort, I'll say. And that is actually conducted by ServiceNow professionals. Do I have that right?
Yes, mostly. Rise Up and Now Learning are pretty hand in hand. I would say, and Rise Up is really a part of all of it, right? Like we're rising up with ServiceNow, no matter what program you're in, whether you're
Sure.
doing self-paced Now Learning or you're doing a next gen cohort. And yeah, and so those other two are application based, where you'll be with a certain group and you have certain meeting times. And the thing about those groups is they have a little bit more access to, I guess, how do I word it? They'll get to see
Resources?
they get well, yes, more resources. And I mean, really, there's a ton of resources with those two programs, like Next Gen and the Skill Bridge.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about you. When you talked about your ServiceNow story, you talked about sort of like the challenges of adulting, right? Like having kids and needing to take them to, football games or soccer games. And I just think of myself with three children and navigating, their lives and then my professional life. So those are some of the challenges in midlife when you're career pivoting. What might you see as some of the advantages as a midlife career pivoter that you bring to the table in your professional life?
Sure. I had to work past that. We talked a little bit about at first I kind of took a little bit of a grief stint of like, I'm walking away from this without really realizing that I was really taking those skills with me, not losing anything other than a different job title. But yeah, it's definitely a hard, it's I think anything that we start over and have to start from scratch and put our training wheels on is hard. And especially, I mean, I have kids in college, so I'm like, I'm starting my career over and they're starting their career, and
Mm.
it's interesting to put on that hat, but it's also empowering because I'm showing them that I'm not afraid of change and that it's okay to change. I mean, when we were younger, the telephone company was a huge job,
Yeah.
and some of the jobs that we knew as kids don't exist anymore. And
Sure.
so, I think being older and have worked so hard for the career I had, it was definitely challenging to say, okay, I'm ready to walk away from this.
Sure.
Um,
And
I,
you came up with a 5-point playbook that you're going to share today. How did you come up with it? Was it by trial and error? Did you already have a game plan in mind? Like, how did this come about?
Sure. I'm not an expert in this, but I definitely have found that kind of what to touch back on what you said. We kind of talked about this probably off camera. Is the female presence becoming more prevalent in IT, and so I have found through my experience is a lot of us women coming to this community have really banded together to support one another. And I think of some of the tips that they've taught me or that that I've shared with them based on our experiences and tried to put a list together, to best share that. And by no means is it an expert list. It's just, some tips that work for me.
Awesome. Well, I'm ready to get into it. Are you ready to get into it and share with us?
I'm ready to get into
Let's
it.
do it. Let's do it.
All right. So we'll start with tip number one.
Tip number one.
All right. So we have embrace simple learning. And I do not think that learning ServiceNow is simple by any means. In fact, that's why I wanted to have three words to represent, some assistance here. Is if you're anything like me, you want to get into a class and be the expert. You want to know everything. And well, with ServiceNow, you're just always going to run into a challenge, right? Because there's so much to learn and so many different aspects of the platform that when you start in your fundamentals class, I highly recommend knowing that this is going to be broad knowledge and that you're getting a really great overview. You're learning the lingo and you're learning a lot about the platform foundations, but by no means are you an expert in what that is. And I kept finding myself really overwhelmed at first because I wanted to just know. I wanted to know how all this worked. And it was really my husband who was like, you need to understand that. And we like to use terms using our old career, right? So if I were to go to law school, I would learn all kinds of law. I would learn, but I wouldn't be an expert in any of these fields until I actually graduated law school and then focus my attention to one practice and build that practice from there.
That's
And
a
I
great
think this,
analogy. That's a really great analogy because law is really exhaustive and so is ServiceNow. So
yes,
is ServiceNow. So I love how you kind of like said, okay, so we're going to like kind of break this off into pieces. There's a East African proverb that says the way to eat the elephant is one bite at a time. And so that really hits. So please continue.
yeah. And so that, just knowing that that foundation is really going to help you in this when you get to those advanced topics. And right now, just embrace the simple and let it be broad and know that you don't have to understand it all in one class. So that's my first
So,
tip.
so embrace simple learning, understand the broad foundational concepts. Got that. Got it. Okay, so what's number two?
All right. Number two is to leverage your past experience. As you and I have talked about, I think midlife is somewhat of a superpower, right? I don't have a lot of the insecurities I had in my 20s. I don't have, I have a ton of experience in multiple industries and I have a unique perspective and I can appreciate that now, especially being in it and having a ServiceNow job in the industry is I can, really appreciate my past experience. And also I can apply so many things from my past experience to what I'm doing now. And I think it's important to acknowledge that for yourself if you're job hunting and you're looking at an application and it says you need these skills and maybe the first thing your brain does is, well, I've never done this, I'm out.
Yeah.
Well, look at it again and then look at your past experience and try to really apply what is that? What is this experience and how can I translate that into the ServiceNow industry or to the specific role I'm applying for?
When I think about your role as a customer success manager within the ServiceNow ecosystem, perhaps you can share like what are some of those past experiences in your previous professional life and as a paralegal that you're able to leverage in this current role in this current seat that you have as customer success manager.
Yeah, absolutely. My soft skills, 100%. I'm used to very big personalities. I worked with attorneys, judges, and I will tell you, court secretaries are probably the hardest personalities to work through. Um, well, maybe in the South. But yeah, so having that, I manage multiple cases, whereas now I'm managing multiple projects. I manage multiple escalations, which is really the same. I'm doing the same sort of escalation management I was as a paralegal. But now I'm doing it for ServiceNow projects, making sure that customers are happy, seeing their outcomes. I mean, I was doing that in legal. I was starting with a basis of what a client wanted, and I was seeing that through to an outcome. And there's so many different variables that could happen from the time they hire you to the time that you deliver, at your final, whether it be mediation or court. So I find it very similar. Just a lot of different words to learn and use. And so
Yeah, those are great. I mean, you talk about using those soft skills, and you've kind of sharpened those in your previous employment, and how you're able to bring them over now. Customer success manager, you are dealing with all kinds of personalities, so that is definitely a skill set that's going to make a lot of sense here in the ServiceNow environment. So, what is the third point in your 5-point playbook?
sure. I really love this one. It's network with
Hmm.
intention. And I say this because I have found a lot of people say that I'm not good at networking, or I don't want to network, or I'm not skilled. Like, this is not my thing. For me, I hid behind an attorney or attorneys. I wasn't necessarily out networking. That was their job. Not that I wasn't afraid to, but this actually came to me when I stayed at home for a little bit. I went from career mode to stay at home mom, and I actually struggled with that a lot. So I read this book called The Like Switch, and it's by an FBI agent who talks about his what he calls a friendship formula.
Hmm.
And the friendship formula is proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity. And so to give this to you in a ServiceNow example, proximity would be me just showing up, just maybe being at a dev meetup, or maybe just seeing me on LinkedIn. I'm just in the room. You're seeing my face, you're seeing some things. I've now entered proximity. And then I dial that up by turning up the frequency. Maybe now I'm on screen with Kali Alexander doing a LinkedIn Live. And of course, the duration and intensity, reaching out. I have a lot of people reach out to me and ask me to network with them or to give them tips. And I can't get to everybody, but I appreciate their intent. And I think the people who really do network, I really do see them get jobs in ServiceNow. And so I recommend, if it's not an area that you're skilled at, to pick up a book, get Carl Sagan's like How to Make Friends and Influence People, whatever. If that's a skill you need to work on, it's worth working on.
That is so important, this piece about networking. And it's not necessarily something that people either, a skill set that people either have or don't have. It's my view that any skill set you can learn, just about any skill set, even things that you probably think, oh, you need to have a natural talent, like singing, for example. Singing is actually something that you can actually learn. So if you can learn, for me, I'm like, if you can learn how to sing, you can certainly learn how to network, right? Um,
Yeah.
I appreciate this book. I've never heard of it before, and I think you said that it's entitled The Light Switch.
The like, yeah.
Oh,
Like,
the like
I want you
switch.
to like me. Yes.
Ah, okay. Now this was by a previous. So we're not going to go down this rabbit hole too much, but I'm so intrigued now. Is this book specifically about networking, or did you find pieces within that book that you applied to your networking journey?
I apply it to joining the PTA. I apply it to everything,
Is it a networking book though?
it's just, yeah, it's he's an FBI agent who is skilled in turning people over to become spies for America. And so he talks about how he does that and how he gets people to talk to him and switch. And there's so many valuable tidbits in there that I have found. I mean, it relates to your relationship with your family. It relates to your gym friends, your everything, because I mean, really showing up, people let their guard down. Like, they know, oh, you're around, you must be, I'm comfortable with you now, you're
Ah,
here.
okay.
And so it's those kinds of tips.
And you said that it's proximity, frequency, duration, and intensity.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So, what is point 2 in the 5-point playbook of career reinvention.
All right. So here I've got practice for interviews. So my daughter's on here. She's supposed to be posting some links, so we'll see if she does it. But I do have and I say practice for interviews because I know this is kind of a no-brainer, but it's also at the same time, if you come from a different industry, you could probably pass through an interview with flying colors in that industry. I know I could for a legal job. But when you're having to talk about ServiceNow and it's not an area you're comfortable with, how can we prepare for those tough questions and relate them in a way that makes you sound like you understand ServiceNow, whether or not you've had that experience? So for me, like a subject matter expert, we don't use that in law, but we have those.
Sure.
Like, how can I apply that here? Or how can I apply some of the terminology from ServiceNow and into some of those interviews? And there are some really great resources on YouTube. And I think the earlier you get into the habit of interviewing and getting prepared to answer those questions, the more confident you are during that interview process. I mean, you're really going to set yourself out from other people, and having those questions of tell me a time, right? Those are hard questions. Like, tell me a time you had a conflict with a coworker. Tell me a time. Like, you want to think those through and not be on the spot like a deer in headlights. So I think that's a super important part about landing your role in the next, when you're transitioning.
Say that someone who is watching this right now and they're taking voracious notes and they get to this part and they're doing a self-paced program. Maybe they're not a part of a larger learning cohort or boot camp. And they get to this fourth step about practicing for interviews. How does one go about finding people to practice with? What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, so if they're part of Next Gen, we do have on
If they're not part
Circle.
of Next Gen, that's what I'm saying. If it's
Okay.
someone who is
They're not part
outside
of
of
Next
that.
Gen. I think you can reach out and ask. I mean, I personally am happy to study on my own, listening to YouTube videos and kind of
Yeah.
just working through those questions. Before I interviewed with GlideFast, I literally went through those questions and typed them out and had them prepared, even though I wasn't going to read them off the
Yeah.
screen during the interview. I just wanted to be comfortable with them. So, you want to reach out to your network. I know we had met somebody in at the most recent Nashville Dev Meetup who's looking to get a job, and I said, hey, if you ever need anything, reach out, and she did. And then sometimes what I'll do is surprise people who we call them peer reviews,
Yeah.
because they're our peers. I'm not better than them, or they're very much my peer. And I'll surprise them and bring Dale. And then and because
The workflow cowboy himself.
I bring him because he really does interview people to work at ServiceNow. So that's helpful. But I
So
think there's a lot of areas you can go to, like SN Devs. You can go to Discord. You can go to the community page on ServiceNow. You can go ServiceNow Community Rise Up blog and ask for help there. I know that I've answered some things on there and helped out some. I've actually found other ServiceNow wives on there who were looking for guidance. And so there's a lot of places you can look and ask, even if you're not in a next gen cohort.
awesome. So what I heard you say is you can go to SNDev. I heard you say you can go to the Discord channel. And I think I also heard you say you can go to the ServiceNow community.servicenow.com.
Yeah, they have a Rise Up blog, and
Awesome.
that's if you're trying to be self-paced and learn, that's your place to go ask questions. There's also networking. They have a monthly networking meetup that they just put out. So if you're
Yes.
not in Next Gen and you want to network, that's a really great place to check out. And my daughter's supposed to post a link to that too.
Awesome. So we'll definitely have all the links that Christina's referencing available to you in the notes for this show. And, what you're saying now about interview practice, it goes back to the third point, which was network. So you're leaning on the network that you've built in point 3 to help you, get that experience before you actually go into the real interview itself. That you're leaning on your network to help prepare you for this interview practice. So am I understanding that correctly, Christina?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, doing your research on the company you're interviewing too. I know before I interviewed with GlideFast, I'd probably watch Glide Chats, probably
Yes.
all of them.
Oh,
So
yes. That is a big one. That the part about research, and it's interesting because I have research here as something that I want to ask you about, but since we're here now, talk more about researching the company that you're interviewing with. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
yeah, there's so much content out there and there's so many things you could do to learn. Uh, for me, it was I wanted to work at GlideFast very much, like probably years before I started with GlideFast. So I had already been looking into them and knew a lot about them, but I learned a lot from the Glide Chats. I learned a lot of where they acknowledged um, weaknesses too. I mean, Mike Lombardo would talk about how nobody's an expert in ServiceNow. That stuff made me feel better, that no matter how much you learned, you'd still never know everything there is to know. And, you get to really know more about what the day-to-day is like when you go and listen to these YouTube channels and you're reading their blogs and you're really getting an understanding of what they're doing.
That's excellent. In each of the organizations, they have some type of public facing content, whether, GlideFast happens to be one where there is a lot of public facing content in terms of like YouTubes and blogs and things like that. There are other partners out there, the ServiceNow mothership itself, there's lots of information but even for the smallest partners, by following and researching on their LinkedIn, you can learn and glean a lot of information that you can certainly bring up in the interview. So I really appreciate that you said that. So we are down to number 5, Christina. Are you ready to let us know what the 5th part of your 5-point playbook is?
Yes, I'm ready.
All
All
right, let's do
right,
it.
here we go. So the learning never
Ah,
stops.
the learning never stops. You kind of
And
hinted to this, didn't you?
these really fall into all of these tips, right? Because you start with learning and it doesn't end there. You're learning the foundations. You're not an expert, you're at foundational level, and the learning never stops. And if you're in a career that is always evolving, I mean, law is the same way. You have to go to continuing legal education. In the medical field, you have to go to continuous education. In ServiceNow, you definitely have to keep up and you have to keep that learning going. Now we're introducing AI and Now Assist and all these things, and you want to be on top of the game. And there's so much content out there. It's endless. And ServiceNow has so many offerings for you to learn and so many workshops and things that you can do at your disposal that it's really easy to continue this one so long as you have that fortitude to really continue. And to also work on your self-development, because it's a process, right? Like career mid career shifting midlife. I feel like a lot of the personal development I did really played a role in my confidence to do something like that. And so, I like books, I like blogs, I like anything where I'm learning about myself and my limitations or my non-limitations, as well as, my technical knowledge as well. I strive to be credible, and I feel like there's nothing that can make you more credible than having that knowledge.
I love this is a really solid playbook you hear. We have number 1, embrace simple learning. In fact, why don't we do this, Christina? Why don't we go through each of these 5 points and you give like a quick little one-liner for each one, and then we'll wrap it up. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, so number 1, embrace simple learning. What do you mean there?
So don't get overwhelmed, learn the foundations, learn as much as you can, and don't stress yourself out. You will get there. It takes time, just like anything else. Your first 6 months, you probably don't know what you're doing,
Perfect. Number
but you will
2, leverage past experience. What do you mean there?
Use all the skills, whether you're a bartender, a house cleaner, whatever you were doing before, you have skills that are buried in there that are just waiting to come out.
Awesome. Number 3, network with intention.
Yeah, do your research. If networking is not your thing, then find a book, find a blog, find a YouTube video to help you out because it's important.
Number 4, practice for interviews.
You got to work that muscle just like you do anything else. And if you want that job, you've got to stand out among the thousands of people who are trying to get into this community right now.
And number 5, learning never stops.
Yeah, just keep going, just keep keep knocking them out, and really what most people will tell you is just get on the platform and start building.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina Stubblefield, Customer Success Manager and ServiceNow Rising Star Class of 2024. Thank you so much for being my guest on this episode of 100 Days of ServiceNow.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
And hey, wasn't that great? You have your 5-point playbook right there, thanks to Christina Stubblefield. And who am I? Well, I'm Kylie Alexander, host and account executive at GlideFast Consulting. If your organization is seeking greater efficiency in its operations, in its IT operations, then reach out. I'm here to help. My DMs are open. Until next time, be kind, stay curious. Bye.